So something you might do at least a couple of times in your playthrough of the 248K mod for Factorio is manufacture a bunch of each of the three kinds of rocket components and launch a bunch of rockets. Probably with cargo and then for science, it's fine, don't worry about it. What we're going to do today is have some reflections and balance notes here, trying to talk over a launching rocket about some of the 248K specific ways of making these resources in the late game, and other late game related resource observations, starting with the star engine, which costs a lot of power grid. It's pretty easy to line up because there aren't that many ways the different parts fit together. It will take protium, which has a couple of processing steps but is basically just water pumped out of a lake, and turn that into, with enough power grid, its own kind of iron. That's nice, 500 per second, but how many plates is that? It turns out it's 1-to-1 star engine iron to plates. So this is 500 iron a second, that's 11 blue belts of plate. And this assembler isn't keeping up, but that's fine. Later on, you get a 1-to-1 recipe of star engine iron into gear wheels, and then a 1-to-1 recipe of star engine iron into steel, which is absurdly good. I mean, late game with gear wheels, we're kind of used to a 2 to 1.4 rate of iron into gear wheels because of productivity bonuses. Steel, we're still kind of used to 5 iron plate to 1 steel, maybe 1.2 steel if we're putting our productivity bonuses in. Earlier in the mod, this ratio was also pretty much how things went. 500 iron to 1 steel plate in the casting stage versus 100 iron per iron plate, in the earlier metal casters. But by the time you get to Star Engine, it's 1-to-1 iron to steel plate. This could have easily delivered 100 steel plate or even 200 steel plate and still been absurdly good. But I guess the thing is, at the point where it's all just river water that you're hitting with a bunch of power grid and getting 10 blue belts of stuff for free, it's probably not even that much of a big issue that steel is basically free, because it's all basically free. So yeah, moving on. The second thing I wanted to talk about is the kerosene processing into rocket fuel, because basically it's not all that good, which is a shame. 248K has its own kind of petrochem stuff, and all of the big advanced recipes for this all deliver kerosene, and you can turn kerosene into rocket fuel. It's just not great, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, it's in a chem plant rather than an assembler, which means that there are only 3 slots as opposed to the assembler's 4, but also you can't even put prod mods or even the affordable Stokes module line into these chem plants. You have to use the really expensive Gauss modules, which is kind of awful. And then in the kerosene to solid fuel stage, same thing here. We can't actually use the Stokes modules. We have to use the Gauss modules, which are incredibly expensive and probably not worth it here. The kerosene into solid fuel is also the bad ratio, air quotes, in the sense that it has the same 20 to 1 solid fuel ratio that gas and solid fuel do, as opposed to the 10 to 1 light oil for solid fuel. I don't know, not a chemical engineer, maybe that's realistic, but I was looking at the numbers of just what was good within this mod, and concluded that the best thing to do to get kerosene into rocket fuel in the late game was to go for this carbon-enriched kerosene separation, which gives us a bunch of sulfuric acid byproducts, which is also fine. This we can get productivity bonuses from pretty affordably. The oil processing we can also get productivity bonuses from pretty affordably. And so now we've got heavy oil. And so now we take our productivity bonuses and we hammer that through the regular vanilla cracking. Then we turn that into solid fuel from light oil with productivity bonuses. Then we turn that into rocket fuel, and that's all nice and productivity bonusing, and we get a lot of stuff out, except it's also very vanilla. Like we get a lot of kerosene out of this, and I know that kerosene has at least historical uses that are kind of adjacent to rocket fuel, and then it just doesn't end up very good or really worth doing here. Like, if we could even put the Stokes modules in either of these processes, that would be a thing that would make it a little more competitive, but at the moment it's just, I guess we're doing vanilla rocket fuel builds, because they're the way that you get the most stuff out. So kerosene for rocket fuel, not super impressive. Moving on to, if I haven't ballsed up these numbers, and maybe I've ballsed up these numbers, this is a rocket component build that will maintain 1 rocket per minute, I think. I don't have boxes down here, so all this guy's just caching on the belt, and they're kind of sad. And yeah, there's 48 assemblers in here, which are each speed 5.5, which is the same speed you'd get if you were doing big linear beacon things in vanilla. So yeah, you can build these things pretty compactly in the 24AK mod, because these beacons are kind of strong, not even as strong as they could be, but the point being, yeah, we've got a chunk of RCUs, a chunk of LDS with the normal vanilla LDS recipe, a chunk of rocket fuel using the vanilla rocket fuel recipe, we just talked about that, and then, oh, I forgot quite an important thing. I need this to be able to turn these guys on. Down here we have these pokey little 6 things. What is this? Turns out this build here is a build that will supply the same LDS output as the entire other LDS thing we were just looking at over here. Like, all of this with the vanilla recipe is replaced by just these 6 assemblers and 2 beacons with the 248K low density structure recipe. This recipe, I reckon, is crazy good for a couple of reasons. We can't even productivity bonus at this until we get also the really expensive Gauss line, and it's probably still amazingly good. So first of all, this recipe, each cycle kicks out 4 low density structure, which means that it's super competitive on copper, even though the copper is slightly, you know, with 30 in this recipe as opposed to usually 20, but also the 20-second craft time. This could easily have an 80-second craft time and be more in line with the low density structure and still be absurdly good. Because the other thing about this craft speed is these buildings, these nuclear assemblers, are I think there's an upgrade from this as well, but you can't put this LDS recipe in a normal assembler. You can only put it in these assemblers that have a base speed of 3.5. So with a little bit of moduling and beaconing, and these aren't even we could module this harder if we wanted to. A crafting speed of 10.5, but bear in mind that's for 4 low density structure. So this is more like a crafting speed of 42, as opposed to the vanilla version, which is a crafting speed of 5.5 for 1.4 low density structure, because productivity bonus. Yeah, it's pretty easy to see that this, like, it's wild to have an LDS build that's kind of limited by the input capacity of stack inserters inserting copper. We could module this harder, we could have these beacons going harder, and that's not the only reason why I think this recipe is strong. I think we should go and talk about the ceramic composite and the fiberglass as well. So over here I have another little demonstration setup, actually talking about copper first. Yeah, even though the 248K mod can't take productivity bonuses, the fact that it's like the vanilla version gives you 1 low density structure for 20 copper with a productivity bonus. The 248K mod gives you 4 low density structure for 30 copper. This is the amount of copper you need to build enough LDS to launch 1 rocket in vanilla. A whole train, the whole wagon, another whole wagon, a bit over half a wagon. In 248K world, for this late game LDS recipe, it's a full wagon of copper and then less than half a wagon of copper. It's about twice as effective on copper for LDS. So this doesn't include the RCUs, which are also a big copper deal, but it's straight up way more effective on copper despite not having productivity bonuses. I guess you'll still have productivity bonuses in the silo, but the vanilla recipe also uses plastic, which means gas, which means some kind of petrochem build like this, maybe with the mod stuff that we looked at before, but it means, you know, a giant mess of pipes, pumps pumping things out, somewhere fluid throughput issues, controls to pump things to cracking, all this kind of stuff that we recognize from Petrochem builds, whereas the 248K mod needs ceramic composites and fiberglass, and both of those I'm going to claim are easier than plastic, both like at all and also to just scale. Like if I throw the stack inserter in here so that this magical resource is getting moved to places by logistic spots. Down here we have a couple of builds that demonstrate how easy it is to make these two resources. So we've got the drills. These drills go into stone quarries. These stone quarries can be anywhere. They don't need to be on a stone patch. And then, yeah, we crush the stone, we cook it into glass, we crush the glass, we spin the crushed glass into fiberglass, and now we've got fiberglass. And there aren't any fluid inputs here at all. It's just stuff on a belt, stuff being direct inserted. This is all fantastic and can scale really well. I don't think this is not ratioed well, but like whatever, we'll see something about that later. And then the ceramics are the same. It's still just drills into quarries that can be anywhere, into there's kind of a cooking step. There's a couple of fluids in here in the smelting cycle, but otherwise, okay, we do need more fluids to get the ceramics out as well, but the majority of this is also just items being moved around by stack inserters. We don't really need to worry about fluid throughput at all. We definitely don't need to do this whole mess of cracking stuff. So I reckon that that's just a thing that makes this 248K mods recipe stronger. And in fact, somewhere down here, yeah, here's a thing to look at. This is also 3 fiberglass into 4 low density structure. So it's not even that we need things that aren't petrochem in our items instead. It's also that we need vastly fewer of them to actually make the low density structure that we need. And also that because we've just got like some way of managing to get drills into quarries that can be anywhere, into all of this processing, this rail node here produces, yeah, we've got 3 of these kind of semi-horseshoe things, which each provide a full belt of glass, a full blue belt of glass, which is converted into a full blue belt of, I mean, it looks like there are a couple of gaps, but basically 3 blue belts of fiberglass, which if we chase through this recipe and look at the ratios, that's 4 blue belts of LDS, which is pretty absurd. So yeah, this recipe, pretty absurd, quite strong, probably doesn't need to be that strong, but that's probably fine. I guess the other thing to mention is RCUs. RCUs still made from processing units and speed modules. Blue chips have some mod-specific stuff in them. Red chips also have some mod-specific stuff in them, so even if you think you're doing a vanilla RCU build, you already had to do some mod stuff in there for a couple of the inputs, so that's fine. No notes about RCUs, they're great. But yeah, LDS are a bit strong, nuclear assemblers a bit strong, kerosene into rocket fuel a bit weak, a bit unimpressive, and overall those were my notes for the late game 248K rocket component stuff. I just build a bunch of rockets, I guess. You're going to need all the rockets, you're going to need a lot of rockets.